It is Monday, April 8th, 2024, and we're about 5 hours from home for the special chance to railfan under a total solar eclipse. The last eclipse with a path through the contiguous U.S. was annular rather than total, and swept from central Oregon to the Gulf near Corpus Christi, Texas in October of 2023. Before that, the last total eclipse was in August of 2017, also starting in Oregon, but hitting the water near Charleston, South Carolina this time around. Before that, you'll have to look all the way back to 1979, and after today, you'll be waiting until the mid-2040s for it to happen again. For this reason, as well as prior experience watching trains here, we situate ourselves along Walker Road near Westfield, New York, roughly a mile and a quarter west of the popular Gale Street Railfan Park. After less than 10 minutes here, we're already greeted by two trains, a westbound autorack on the CSX and an eastbound manifest on the NS. The double-track main through Westfield, which CSX calls its Erie West Subdivision, was once part of the New York Central's famed water level route, connecting New York City and Chicago with fast freight and passenger trains such as the renowned 20th Century Limited. The single NS main, referred to by the road as the Lake Erie District, was once the New York, Chicago, and St. Louis, known better as the Nickel Plate Road. Although started in part to break the local monopoly held by the Vanderbilt family, the NKP would fall under Vanderbilt control only days into its operation, sold for $7.2 million in 1882. In these years, the road was used lightly as most traffic stayed on the water level route. In 1915, the U.S. Attorney General notified the New York Central that their rule over these parallel lines was a violation of federal antitrust law. Opting to keep their flagship line intact, the Central sold off the nickel plate a few months later, allowing it to grow once again. The NKP, among others, merged into the Norfolk and Western in 1964, which itself would merge with the Southern Railway in 1982, forming the Norfolk Southern we see today. It's an overcast, blustery morning on the south shore of Lake Erie. Temperatures hover around 50 degrees and are made a bit more nippy when coupled with an average wind speed of about 15 miles per hour and a fair share of gusts. We reserve hope that the clouds will make way come eclipse time around 3 this afternoon, but in the meantime, it's only about 20 minutes until our next train on CSX trackage, an eastbound pointed by a rebuilt Mack. The signal at CP58 shows a red over flashing green aspect called a limited clear under former Conrail rules. This means that, before passing the signal, the train in question is to be moving at limited speed, which is defined at 40 or 45 miles per hour for freight or passenger moves respectively. More often than not, this aspect is used when switches are lined for a train to cross between tracks. Although majorly under Vanderbilt control and essentially operated as an extension of the New York Central, the water level route west of Buffalo was owned on paper by a number of smaller charters and didn't belong to the Central proper until 1914 when it and its 11 subsidiaries merged operations. Where we stand, these tracks existed as part of the Lake Shore and Michigan Southern Railway, or even earlier as the Buffalo and Erie. Many years later, in 1968, the New York Central merged with a longtime rival in the Pennsylvania Railroad to form the Penn Central. Due to increasing competition from other transport, stifling government regulation, a begrudging acquisition of the failing New Haven, and general corporate dysfunction stemming from the different philosophies held between Pennsy and Central Brass, the PC only went 2 years before entering what was at the time the largest bankruptcy in U.S. history. In 1976, the federal government stepped in and assumed control of many suffering northeastern railroads to form the Consolidated Rail Corporation, or Conrail. Thanks to loosening regulations, Conrail started to turn a profit by the 80s and went private in 1987. After both bid separately to acquire Conrail to no avail, NS and CSX struck an agreement in 1997 to split Conrail into two, with the former receiving 58% and the latter receiving 42% of Conrail's assets, effective June 1, 1999. The former New York Central is divided at Cleveland, with CSX getting the rails eastward to New York and Norfolk Southern owning the line west to Chicago. After another 40 or so minutes, the NS rails are hot from a short eastbound manifest with foreign power up front. In mere minutes, Amtrak 48, the Lakeshore Limited, appears in the distance. Today's eastbound is actually yesterday's, departing Chicago around 9:30 p.m. and traveling through Indiana and Ohio under the cover of darkness. In Albany, the train splits into two, with its main leg terminating in New York City and the other, now numbered 448 or 1448, ending in Boston. Running nearly 3 hours behind schedule, it's no wonder that the nickname Late for Shore Limited was coined for this route. The old nickel plate is decently active today, as another manifest makes use of the single track, this time a westbound. It appears we might not see more NS for a little while, as our train slows to a crawl and eventually stops within view. A third of an hour later, headlights appear from the west on the CSX. Only 10 minutes pass before our next train, a westbound intermodal, bends into view as it passes the Gale Street Park. Another 20 minutes, another westbound intermodal on the CSX, and another pair of AC traction GEs. Following this westbound is a nearly 50-minute lull, broken by a hyrailer of all things. To the west, the hyrailer meets our next train, an eastbound with a mix of intermodal and automotive loads called autostacks by some. On the other side of the hour, we get one more train before the start of the eclipse as a westbound crosses over at the points. Looking over at the NS rails, our train from earlier is back on the move. It'll still be a while before anything else comes through, though, giving us ample time to savor the eclipse. Around 2 p.m., the sun is already partially obscured, but not nearly enough to view with the naked eye. Even with a camera, an ND 100,000 filter is used to get a good image. The effect this has on ambient lighting starts out minimal, especially under cloud cover. Until totality gets closer, it's essentially like a dimmer switch being moved very slowly.
If you want to actually use it. I guess I can't do that.
As the clouds recede and the moon blocks more and more of the sun, shadows become sharper and the present sunlight takes on more of a reddish hue. Totality will occur in roughly 25 minutes. "10 minutes until totality. The sun appears as a thin crescent. It is still not viewable without protection, but it won't be long at all from here. It's noticeably and significantly dim in any direction you look. Shadows cast from the sun are razor sharp. "5 minutes out, and nothing but a sliver of sun is left in the sky. The Lord's dimmer switch is nearing the bottom, and what's left of ambient light resembles dusk on a cloudy day. 30 seconds from totality. From here, we can watch as the final slit of sun disappears behind the silhouette of the moon.
You can look at it with your bare eyes right now.
Once fully inside of the umbra, the shadow cast onto Earth by the moon, there is no protection required for the eye nor the camera, and one can simply stand in awe at one of nature's most elusive phenomena.
That's incredible.
As the sun peeks back out, notice how much our surrounding environment brightens over only about 30 seconds.
Yep. That's absolutely surreal. Wow. Yeah, we're going to the next one in 20 years. I hope you know that. Holy shit. Look over there. Because they're over in totality over there. Look how dark it is. Yeah.
That's so cool how you can see the wing kind of.
Only 30 more seconds later, a westbound headlight peers around the bend near Gale Street. We could only imagine how the crew felt just about a mile ago.
I'm proud of myself with this license plate. Like I don't. It's I filled it and I put it through that and I grabbed it up around there and yeah, I wasn't expecting it to hold. Proud of it. You're gonna make this train feel so recorded.
After another lull, almost an hour and a half long, NS strikes first with a westbound manifest, abundant with power.
Norfolk Southern, milepost 59.0. No defects.
After only about 7 minutes, an eastbound intermodal appears on the CSX rails. From the other direction comes an EMD-powered manifest roughly a quarter hour later. Before traffic slows down again, one more intermodal glides past us east. It's golden hour by the time we see our next train on the water level route. Throughout the afternoon and evening, the weather has been nigh on perfect. After all, it doesn't get much better than 65 and sunny, especially with trains aplenty. Another Mac-led eastbound shows up after less than 15 minutes. In the minutes leading up to sunset, Westfield gives us one more train in the form of a westbound intermodal at track speed. As the westbound disappears into the distance, there's nothing else to do but to savor the sunset. Westfield, New York has been friendly to us today, between a healthy handful of trains and the weather clearing up just in time for the eclipse. We're not quite done railfanning for the day, but it is time to think about a bite to eat and to take preparations to settle down. With the dining destination set, we leave Westfield for the nearby town of Brocton, taking a scenic twilight drive along the lake. The eatery in question is the Nickel Plate Depot, situated along Central Avenue to the north of town. Conveniently across from the restaurant is its namesake, the Nickel Plate Road, rather NS in present day, as well as the CSX just another 100 or so feet north. In the distance, the signal at the east end of Portland Siding can be seen upgrading its aspect to clear, meaning the NS dispatcher has lined a westbound train through. After about 10 minutes, the train in question makes its way through the quiet town of Brocton. Another 10 minutes later, we're surprised by one last train on the CSX while packing up to leave. In the moment, I unfortunately forgot to turn on my mic, so I'll be sending you off in silence. All in all, though, today treated us well trackside and made for a memorable outing. It's time for us to call it a night and get some sleep. Thank you for watching, be sure to look out for more soon, and happy railfanning.